By now we all know the DJI Mavic 4 Pro is easily the best consumer drone out there. We've literally had it thrown in our faces, it's everywhere at the moment. However, there is a quote in the movie Top Gun Maverick that goes a little something like this. It's not the plane, it's the pilot. And that quote absolutely leads over into the drone industry as well. So you can have the best drone in the world, but if you don't know the right settings to get the best image quality possible out of your camera, and also the right stick configuration, including the right camera movements to get the most dynamic shots possible, you might as well be flying a potato up in the sky, mate. So in today's video, we're going to be breaking down all the correct settings that you need to get the best image quality possible out of your drone, and then we'll get into some more fun, creative elements and also some stick configurations to get you the smoothest motion you possibly can with whatever drone you're using. Let's get stuck into this one. Number one, mate, the most important thing, in my opinion, that you need to do to get a great image quality out of your drone is sticking to your 180-degree shutter angle. That is when you double your frame rate to get your shutter speed. Now, you'll notice when you see a shot that has got a really high shutter speed to limit the amount of light coming into the lens, the shot honestly hurts my nervous system, mate. The shot is really rugged and really jumpy, and there's no motion blur at all. It looks really unnatural. Honestly, it hurts my nervous system when I see a shot that's got incredibly high shutter speed, not sticking to their 180-degree shutter rule. It is going to give you the most buttery smooth cinematic shots that genuinely feels natural, and it's not going to kind of hurt your audience when they're watching it. So you are going to have to use ND filters to limit the amount of light that comes onto the sensor so that you can reduce your shutter speed down to that 180-degree shutter rule. Please use your 180-degree shutter rule. It is going to make your shots 10 times better. Number two, and this is a really obvious one, mate, your white balance. Do not be shooting in auto white balance because your color is going to shift and change throughout your entire image, and that's not what we want, mate. We want a solid white balance throughout our shot so that we can grade the color that we've currently got, and that's just something that you need to know as a professional videographer. Never ever shoot in auto white balance unless you're shooting stills. Number three, use your DLOG settings. It is the completely flat color profile in your drone, and now on the Mavic 4 Pro we've got DLOG in all four of our lenses, the main 28mm, the 70mm, and also the 168mm camera. So you really want to utilize that DLOG because it is going to give you the maximum amount of dynamic range so that you can utilize everything that that camera's got. And also, if you are going to be using DLOG, make sure to get a legitimate LUT. You might as well just use the DJI LUTs and then grade your footage from there, because that is going to give you the most color accurate image to start with before you really start applying your grade. Number four, and that is shooting at our native ISO levels. So on the Mavic 4 Pro, we've got our native ISO level of 400 and also 1600. If you stick to them two ISO levels, you are going to get the cleanest image that you can possibly get. We want to try and utilize everything that we possibly can out of our camera, and shooting at them native ISOs is going to give us the cleanest image when we're shooting in DLOG. Do be aware though that this only applies to the main camera. It doesn't apply to the 70mm and also the 168mm. Just shoot at your lowest ISO levels possible when you're shooting on them other two cameras, but at the moment them native ISOs only apply to the main camera. When you're using the main camera, which you probably are most of the time, stick to them levels. You are going to get the most amount of dynamic range out of DLOG and also the cleanest image. Next up is exposure. So we've got a ton of exposure tools that we can use on our drone. We've got zebras and we've also got our histograms so that we can tell when we are blowing out our highlights, and we want to make sure that we get the perfect exposure throughout our shot. On this channel I'm constantly talking about S-Log3, and on S-Log3 you want to expose slightly to the right, whereas on the DJI drones in DLOG you want to be exposing in the middle. So if you expose correctly at your native ISOs in DLOG, that is going to give you the most amount of dynamic range. Just make sure that you're not clipping your highlights. If you clip your highlights in a drone shot, in my opinion, that shot is dead. Utilize your highlights. Your highlights are the most important part of any drone shot. Use them tools to make sure that you don't overexpose, and that is going to give you a really nice professional looking image, even if your shadows are a little bit dark. The next tip is reducing your sharpness in camera so that you can get a really nice, natural, smooth looking shot. And if you do want to add sharpness in post, you can go and do that. But if you do it in camera, you've already baked that sharpness in, and it can look a little bit harsh at times. I personally think the Mavic 4 Pro is a little bit sharp with the default settings, so make sure that you bring your sharpness down to -2, and as I say, you can always adjust that in post. Next up, a very obvious one, and that is making sure that your firmware is up to date every time that you go and fly. When the DJI Mavic 4 Pro come out a few months ago, we had very limited tilt range when it comes to shooting vertically. Now on the new firmware upgrade, we've actually got a larger range to tilt from in that vertical mode, so it's definitely beneficial to make sure that every time you go out and fly, you are up to date with your firmware. Next up is calibrating your sticks to get you the most smoothest dynamic shots you possibly can. Now for us millennials, and obviously you Gen Zers, we are so used to using controllers. I've had a controller in my hand, mate, since I was about 4. So for me to have a controller in my hand is really, really natural. Sorry, boomers, mate, you lot are going to struggle with this one, so this tip is for you. I personally don't think that there's a best way to calibrate your sticks. I do feel like the default settings are really, really good when it comes to the actual sticks themselves. However, one tip that I would give you is reducing your expo to 0.1. That is going to give you the slowest and smoothest movement so that you can get a really nice, elegant move, whether it's up, down, yaw or pitch. Your movement is going to be super silky smooth, so that's the one thing I would say you should do. However, the best way to get good at shooting with your drone is just time. Get time under your belt, flying your drone so that you can really get used to whatever the control settings are, and over time your drone flights are going to be so much smoother. Next up are going to be your markers. Now, I personally never use my thirds markers. I'm always using my center marker so that I know where the center of the frame is, because 99% of the time for me, I'm centrally framing when it comes to flying my drone. I want to know exactly where my center point is, because with all of the settings and the exposure tools littered all over my monitor, I just want to know where my center of the frame is. It also kind of gives you a good idea as to where your horizon is as well. This is completely personal preference. If you want to use your thirds because you're maybe shooting a subject or something like that, I only really need to use thirds when I'm actually shooting on the ground with a camera when I've got a subject in the frame. However, them center markers are absolutely essential for knowing where the center of my frame is. Next up, let's get into some creative stuff, mate, the fun stuff. Now, in my opinion, the best drone shots are multi-move shots. Now, I personally try to use multi-move shots in every single shot that I do. Maybe it's a little bit much. However, most of the time I do feel like they do give you the most creative and dynamic movement possible. So instead of just pushing forward with the drone, you might be tracking to the left and also panning at the same time and tilting at the same time. That is 3 different moves in one shot that is really going to give you a mega dynamic shot. So one of my favorite shots is that track to one side, panning and tilting at the same time. You can also boom into that. So if you want to bring the drone up or bring the drone down as you're doing all that, that's when you're really doing some mad shit. And another multi-move that I really like to do is booming downwards, tracking forwards and tilting up at the same time. Now on the Mavic 4 Pro, we've obviously got that extended tilt range so that we can tilt pretty much straight upwards, mate, and if you utilize that, you can really actually start to tell a bit of a story and try and make the audience feel like intimidated by what you're looking at. I think that new gimbal mechanism has really allowed us to make something look more powerful in the frame. Tilting right up at something in the frame is going to give your audience a sense of intimidation or some power over whatever you're shooting. So if you can utilize them shots in the right way to actually tell a story that you want to tell, or allow your audience to feel something about the location or something that you're shooting in the frame, that is going to make you a much better filmmaker and not just someone who's flying a drone. Next up is actually utilizing all of the different lenses that we've got on our drone. Now the Mavic 4 Pro has obviously got its main wide camera at 28mm, along with that 70mm and also the 168mm lenses. We can shoot all of these cameras in D-Log now so that we can get a really nice match of them colors and of the contrast and the look out of all 3 of them cameras. However, it's actually utilizing all 3 of them focal lengths in one scene to give you a really nice dynamic amount of coverage of a scene. For example, when I was in Madeira, we were shooting this beautiful church, and getting it on all 3 angles really gives the viewer like a dynamic insight as to what we're actually shooting. And also it can help tell a story. We can go nice and wide and establish our scene, show that church in the location that it's in, show the surrounding area, focus it if we want to by sticking it in the middle of the frame, and then we can cut in tighter and make the focus not just about the environment but actually about the subject that we're shooting. Combined with some really nice camera movements, you can get some mad parallaxes when you shoot in them longer focal lengths. So make sure that you utilize them because they're there for a reason. If you want to try and tell a story, focus on one particular subject, add that into a nice wide establishing, now we're actually utilizing the storytelling tools that we've got on our drone. Next up on the creative list is utilizing light. Now we all know that golden hour, when the light is nice and low, is going to give us that beautiful golden colourful glow that we all absolutely bloody love, right? And if you can maximize the amount of time that you shoot in that golden hour, maybe even into blue hour can give it a really, really nice look these days. In my opinion, the Mavic 4 Pro has probably been like the first drone that we can actually shoot good blue hour in, because that drone can actually shoot some half decent low light footage. So this is a really, really simple one. Just shoot when you've got good light. It looks 10 times better than when you shoot at complete midday when that sun is really high and really harsh. The colours, the light, everything looks a little bit rough and hard, mate. If you shoot at the right time of day, that is a really, really simple tip that is going to give you a much better frame and a much better shot. Next up, and in my opinion, one of the most important things to get you a dynamic shot, and that is utilising foreground. When you've got a shot that hasn't got any foreground in it at all, even when you're shooting really fast in sports mode, because there's no reference point in the foreground, you can't really tell how fast that shot's going. And of course, yeah, you can increase the speed of that shot, but if you've got something moving in that frame, it's going to look really unnatural, like waves, for example, or people walking, or cars. All of that stuff is going to be really, really fast and just not look natural at all. So if you can get a bit of foreground in your shot, whether you're tracking around it and panning at the same time, or whether you're literally just tracking forward and you've got a bit of foreground in your shot and you brush past that foreground, especially when you've got your 180-degree shutter rule involved, mate, that is when you're going to get some beautiful motion blur combined with that foreground. And in my opinion, that is when you get the most juicy dynamic shots, mate. Utilize that 180-degree shutter rule with the foreground and you are going to get a much more dynamic shot. When that foreground's actually in there, it gives you a reference point as to like how fast you're going and the movement of your drone. When there's no foreground, it looks very flat and boring, mate. It looks like you've got a bloody tripod in the sky. And finally, mate, the final finishing touch to our shot, and that is your grade. I know we touched on applying the official DJI Lux to your footage once you've got it in D-Log, but actually applying your own grade is really going to make that image come to life, especially when you've got a really beautiful sensor, you've shot in beautiful light, you've utilized all of that dynamic range in D-Log, you've got a nice soft shot, you haven't added too much sharpness, it's nice, juicy, creamy, and the light is perfect. You've got some beautiful foreground. You want to finish that shot off with a beautiful grade. Now I know that color grading is completely subjective, so do whatever grade you see fit, but adding that beautiful grade onto the end of your shot is really going to give it the life that it deserves. Anyway, you lot, I hope you've enjoyed this little tips and tricks video. Honestly, there's been so many times where I've gone out and I've not had like my camera settings perfect, or slightly knocked my shutter speed so that my 180-degree shutter rule hasn't been applied, and then I get back and I'm like, mate, how annoying. So I hope that you guys can really utilize these tips and tricks so that you can get the most out of whatever drone you're flying on. And of course, mate, I'll be catching you lot in the next one, mate. Bosh!